Welcome to Galaxy Brains.
An infinite amount of cash.
I'm your host, Alex Thorn.
The U.S. banking system is sound and resilient.
Bitcoin made a new all-time high.
If you're not long, you're short.
Satoshi's going to come on there, laugh hysterically, go quiet. All Bitcoin's going to be erased.
Bitcoin's the best crypto out there.
Bitcoin is going to zero.
Welcome back to Galaxy Brains. As always, I'm your host, Alex Thorn, head of firm-wide research at Galaxy. Bitcoin not zero. And we have a great episode for you today. Thomas Pacchia, co-founder of PubKey NYC, the hub for Bitcoin in New York. He is back on the show to talk about the huge year that Bitcoin has had, the huge year at PubKey, the central meeting place for all things Bitcoin in the Big Apple. It's a fascinating conversation. We'll talk about how Trump came to PubKey to buy burgers with Bitcoin using the Lightning Network, the ceremonial flag that Senator Elizabeth Warren's office flew above the U.S. Capitol and how it came into PubKey's possession, their work with the Human Rights Foundation, and much more about PubKey and what is next for PubKey. We'll also check in with our good friend Bimnet Abibi from Galaxy Trading to talk about markets. Lots of interesting stuff happening. The Fed lowering rates today. We'll get into it with Bimnet as always. And before we get to all that, I need to remind you to please refer to the link to the disclaimer in the podcast notes and note that none of the information in this podcast constitutes investment advice or an offer, recommendation, or solicitation by Galaxy or any of its affiliates to buy or sell any securities. Let's hop right into the show. Let's go now to our friend Bimnet Abibi from Galaxy Trading. As always, Bimnet, welcome to Galaxy Brains.
Thank you for having me. That was very eccentric.
Well, it's a big day, Fed Day.
It is.
Super Bowl.
Super Bowl.
Is it still the Super Bowl or is it like the Canadian football finals?
It's the Super Bowl.
It is because
I will tell you, it's the Super Bowl because this is the first FOMC where the Fed hasn't had to think about its consequence on the election, right? And so I think this was the first moment where you're getting full honesty out of the Fed and not vagueness. And so I think Powell used it to basically, pivot the market in the direction that he saw fit, which was there's real inflation risk in the market. Trumponomics is inflationary. Mm-hmm. We have solid growth and stuff, but to his words, they need to see further progress on inflation before cutting again. And I think that's a big deal. He's basically saying we need inflation to improve for us to cut further. Yeah. And so, you guys thinking we're going to cut 3-4 more times in 2025, you're probably off sides. Yeah.
Yeah, that was the big, and I should say no ill will meant to our Canadian football friends. But what I meant was the market had been very certain 25 bips cut was coming. It did come. But I guess you're right. What ended up being, and it ended up being a big markets day because of
Absolutely.
This, right? What happened? I mean, look at Bitcoin over my shoulder.
So basically we got a hawkish cut, right? Like it was a cut, but basically set the bar higher for future rate cuts. And, you essentially had, the market start to price in a much less accommodative rate policy path, right? So you had the 5-year point in U.S. Treasury sell off by like 12 basis points or so. You have 10-year yields testing a very crucial level at 450, right? That's the back end of the market. If you do DCF of all assets, right, like it's pegged on where long-run rates are expected to average. So that's genuinely bad for risk, and it looks like we're about to break that level. NASDAQ was off over 4%, right? And I think a lot of it speaks to just kind of the positioning and the froth going into the event. And I think the frothiest asset class in markets right now was probably crypto going in. And so when you had these, kind of risk-off, hawkish impulse as a function of the Fed, like crypto followed, right? It lagged a little bit because you had the ETF buy window and there's some support, but once like 103K gave way in Bitcoin, it was, right down to the next liquidity point, which was 100K. Alt saw a huge flush out as well. But long story short, Powell was hawkish. That was bad for risk assets.
Do you see any value or benefits in the U.S. government building a reserve of Bitcoin?
We're not allowed to own Bitcoin. The Federal Reserve Act says what we can own, and we're not looking for a law change. That's the kind of thing for Congress to consider, but we are not looking for a law change at the Fed.
Bitcoin and crypto is still a risk asset, particularly on sensitive days like FOMC, where the algos and market makers take over, et cetera. And so you had a very substantial sell-off in crypto, and I think it was entirely justified. There's no day that the NASDAQ should be down 4% plus and Bitcoin is unchanged.
One day,
maybe.
If it really becomes a flight to quality asset, like Larry Fink has said.
But think about it this way: what happens to gold in a risk-off scenario? Everything goes to correlation one.
Just to dollars.
Like
It's the last place you
people
go.
go to dollars, go
Yeah.
straight to cash.
I
They
did see
sell
DXY,
risk assets.
DXY.
Gigabit.
Yeah.
Euro through 104. Dollar CAD fresh highs on the year. I mean, it is like people are scrambling to buy dollars because, one, think about it this way. Dollars are not only a flight to quality trade, but they're also a carry trade because the relative yield differential is still like very positive.
Right.
And so, it depends on what currency you're looking at, but let's take Euro or CAD, for example. And so in these kind of moments, it becomes positive carry and a risk off hedge at the same time. So it's really powerful.
You're getting paid to go risk off, basically.
Correct.
Yeah.
And it looks like
Sounds
you
pretty
might
good.
be getting paid more because there's real risk that inflation goes
And they
higher.
might not cut more, right? So
They might not
rates stay
cut more.
high. Yeah.
And I will tell you, I mean, the Trump, it's so inflation. I mean, the guy is on a second-term presidency. He's willing to engage in his policies with the full effect of the government because he's experienced, et cetera. He's not worried about a second term. What does he want to do? He wants to deport millions of people that are in the labor force. He wants to increase tariffs. He wants to cut taxes. This is all inflationary. And the labor market, is at a pretty healthy spot right now. And so you take away all these prime age workers, like it's going to tighten that stuff up.
Yeah.
And so, you had a very visceral reaction in markets, and I think it's appropriate. I mean, NASDAQ, like I was looking at one of the big, mega cap 7 names or mag 7 names, Magnificent 7, sorry. And, I was looking at the chart and it had done a 6.5x from the bottom. Basically, that was a year and a half ago, right? You look at, NVIDIA, Meta, like all these companies have had absolute huge runs, right? These are really crowded positions. Everybody's long these things. And the moment you get a risk-off sell-off, like folks are forced to unwind. It's not, another thing to think about is it's not just about like the fact that stuff is going lower, but it's going lower at a really fast pace, right? And so when vol shoots up, when VIX goes from 12 to 19, folks are systemically like forced to like reduce risk because your risk that was $100 million, like, well, now it's double the vol. So that's $200 million of risk. Your risk limit's $150 million. You automatically have to cut risk. And so that's what you're seeing now, this cascading unwind of positions, and crypto's no different. It's a market that's reflexive to the upside as well as the downside, right? You've got all these, leverage in futures. You've got like levered ETFs, right? You got, the options positions. And so this is like a tinderbox.
Yeah.
Right? And it works to the upside as well as to the downside, and people just don't realize that. Although your profile to the upside is asymmetric versus, defined downside. But that being said, like, markets are violent in both directions.
Yeah, they are. And Powell also made clear that they're not going to raise their target inflation to, say, 3%, which is further hawkish, right? No, he's saying we need inflation to come down much more. Not just to 3%, but we would like it all the way back to 2%.
Corporate PC
So there's
target.
a lot of work to be done, it seems, at the Fed.
Yeah, and what's also notable is you had a dissenter,
Yeah.
right? Like Cleveland, I think it was Mester that
They didn't want to
dissented.
cut.
Oh,
at all.
Yes,
That person.
yes,
Yeah.
correct.
Which
And
hasn't been the case for the prior cuts. They were all unanimous.
basically all unanimous, I believe.
Yeah.
And so, the long run dot went up from like 2.9 to 3.0. Like the cuts for next year went to only 50 bit. Like this was a pretty firm, like, hey guys, we're worried about inflation. I get this. So some of the other research I read is like based on like the seasonal factors and how they calculate inflation. And basically since COVID, there's been a structural bias for inflation to print higher based on how they construct the metric in like December, January, February, March, like basically around this time. And so you're really going into a period where inflation could continue to surprise higher. And you got Trump in his first 100 days that's going to be aggressive with his policies. And so it's just,
It's tricky.
It's very
They're
tricky.
playing it cautious.
You have to be nimble.
Jay Powell unleashed. They did ask him about the strategic Bitcoin reserve. He said, they don't have the Fed. He didn't comment much on it, but he said the Fed doesn't have the statutory authority to buy Bitcoin.
Correct. And
yeah.
I would say that the day the Fed buys Bitcoin, like there are so many problems in the market that you don't really even want to think about it.
Yeah.
Right. And we can get into this discussion, at a different podcast, but the idea of going beyond like a stockpile to me is incredibly dangerous. And from a philosophical standpoint, it raises so many moral hazards that I think it's a little naive to kind of push those kind of agendas. And while folks may benefit in the short run, like the beauty about the U.S. is that they can issue as much debt as possible. They can keep the economy going. They can save the world in situations when markets collapse and stuff. But like to really have a well-functioning economy, you need a healthy dollar, and you need the perception, the confidence in the market to really stay. Right. This whole game in markets is a confidence game. Right. Everybody knows that the U.S. can't repay its debts and that the debt's going to keep going up, et cetera. Right. And Paul Tudor Jones describes it best. It's like being at a wrestling show. Right. It's fake, but you suspend disbelief, similar to how you do in a movie. Right. Mm-hmm. And so that suspension of disbelief is based on the confidence that people have in the U.S., the Fed to be non-biased, and for them to be good stewards of one of the best economies in history. And so, like, when you start, poking away at that confidence that the market has, like, that is the system.
Yeah.
It's based on the ability of the Fed to print dollars, and, it doesn't do lasting harm, right? Yeah. Like, that's the essence of really, like, with monetary policy right now. And so, like, I think Bitcoin will be fine and healthy without this aggressive push for the U.S. to actually buy it.
Mm-hmm. All right, we'll leave it there. My friend Bimnet Abibi from Galaxy Trading, as always, thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Let's go now to our guest and friend, Thomas Pacchia from PubKey NYC. Thomas, welcome back to Galaxy Brains.
Thank you.
What do I call you? You do a lot of other stuff. You've been in Bitcoin a long time.
Yeah, it's been a while now.
Before we, of course, talk about PubKey.
Yeah, of course. So I'm on the board. I'm a director at Stronghold Digital Mining, advisor to a number of mining and Bitcoin companies all across the industry, former Fidelity Mafia, I guess. Present Fidelity Mafia. I don't even know how to.
I think the Mafia is.
How do we talk about ourselves?
It is an alumni organization.
We couldn't pick something better than Mafia. Well, like PayPal Mafia.
I think that's where it is born out of, is the PayPal Mafia.
It should be like a cabal or something. I don't know, something a little bit more mysterious.
Yeah, I think the Journal said the Fidelity Mafia behind big crypto.
Yeah, well, I'm not so sure. Well, we'll see. These things evolve.
We got a long way to go. I mean, if you look at that PayPal Mafia, you got people like Elon Musk and David Sachs and Reid Hoffman, and like they've, no offense to us, we're all, doing well.
Yeah, like, who's our Peter Thiel?
Exactly. I'm not sure. It's a great question.
We'll see.
Maybe Nick, I'm not sure. Well, man, Thomas, it's the end of the year. It's been quite a ride.
Yes.
For PubKey, for Bitcoin.
Yeah.
I was recalling, I think, was it in February of this year that PubKey unveiled an American flag that had been ceremoniously raised above the Capitol in honor of Satoshi Nakamoto by none other than Senator Elizabeth Warren herself?
Yeah, so this was right after the ETFs. The ETFs and like the build up to that really turned everything around with the bear market, right? That was the catalyst that pulled us out of the depths of the FTX. Like Celsius, BlockFi, countless name fallout.
Yeah.
We had a couple of big parties around the ETFs. A lot of the companies that launched ultimately came to PubKey in one form or another. And a friend of the pub gifted to us the flag that was ordered by Elizabeth Warren to be flown in honor of Satoshi Nakamoto, which is part of the Capital Flag program. So anybody can request this, but they don't always get approved. This is for like, local Elks Lodge, chieftains or whatever.
Deceased family, you might ask in honor, or a veteran, or
Exactly.
whomever, a business
Yeah.
leader, really
Yeah.
whomever.
Yeah. So I wonder if there's some intern out there that lost their job in Warren's office.
Yeah, we think this probably got
Rubber stamping
auto-penned,
this.
right? And she didn't.
Probably.
I'm
It's
assuming-
it's,
yeah.
it's poetic, and that also we had that at the pub throughout the year, and we thought that the best way for that meme to live on was to be one of the gifts for President Trump when he visited PubKey in September.
Yep.
Yep.
And so you gave it to President Trump.
We did, yeah. We had it framed. It's actually quite nice. It'll be in the President Trump library at some point. Who knows? Maybe in the Oval Office too. That was one of two gifts. The other gift was replica number 4 in the Buy Bitcoin series by the Bitcoin sign guy.
Yeah.
That was the sign held up behind Janet Yellen when she was Fed chair.
Yep. It's an icon. We had a Bitcoin sign guy, Christian, on this show too. So go back and check that out. I think it was like maybe a full year ago.
He's a gem. Very good friend of mine.
So we'll get to everything in the middle, but you mentioned that Trump, now President-elect Trump, he came to the pub before the election. Was that in September or?
September 18, I believe.
He
Yeah.
came and he bought a bunch of burgers with Bitcoin.
Burgers, some Diet Cokes.
Right, he
used
famously
Bitcoin.
doesn't drink.
No, he
Yeah.
does not. There was no alcohol at that event, but we pulled it off on a tight schedule. We had about 6 days' notice, but I had been working on that. The team had been working on that for maybe like 7 months at that point.
Wow.
So we reached out to a lot of the campaigns, RFK, Vivek, JD, Trump, Harris, Biden.
Yeah.
And the Trump team is extraordinarily media savvy. So the way we pitched it was, think of this as a visit to an ice cream parlor or a donut shop. 20 minutes of your time, you're going to meet this community, which he had also done when he came to the Bitcoin conference in Nashville. But we said if you make a Bitcoin payment at PubKey, that's going to go viral for at least a couple of days. So, their assessment was 20 minutes of our time to go viral for 3 days. Let's do it.
Yeah.
And, I think everybody made good on their promises.
Let's roll a clip real quick from the event.
Good job. You got this whole thing started. I'll sign that.
Menu, yeah.
Would you like one? Do you want a hamburger?
These burgers are killer. They really are.
They're good.
Save your bite.
That's great, man. How's that nice?
That's perfect. Amazing. Beautiful. And one more right here would be fantastic if you don't mind, and then we have some gifts for you.
Good. I want Bitcoin.
We appreciate your open-mindedness. Thank you so much for coming here.
No,
We
it's
really
great.
appreciate
It's a new era, and that's what's happening. It's amazing to see what's happened in such a short period of time. Congratulations.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Mr. President, you want to answer now?
Who wants a hamburger?
Thank you.
These suckers are good, too. They make us good here.
Yeah.
This is a crypto burger. Actually, you should name them. Name a Bitcoin and a crypto. We've got plenty of them you can name. Do you want one? Huh? You want one? Go ahead, take it. She's around. She's been great. Trump, okay, got it?
I mean, I thought it was funny because he's like, you get a crypto burger, or like, and somebody off the camera was like, it's a Bitcoin burger.
That was Mike Germano.
Yeah.
Mike Germano was really quick to correct that one.
A Bitcoin burger.
Correctly so. And then, Trump suggested that we have a Bitcoin burger and a crypto burger on the menu. We don't have that yet. It's not even a Bitcoin burger. It's our smash burger.
It's the best burger in New York that I'm aware of.
We try to bury the Bitcoin elements in PubKey, more of like Easter eggs, if you know, you know. 80% of our customers are just, they don't know it's a Bitcoin bar. They're not Bitcoiners. It's just supposed to be a good neighborhood tavern that happens to be the community home for Bitcoiners.
Yeah, and it is a lot. Now, that was in September, February to September. I mean, that's a lot of time. You guys did a lot of stuff at PubKey. What comes to mind as
Look, it was
notable events that you had?
This year has been insane for Bitcoin, right? And an insane year for Bitcoin is going to be an insane year for PubKey as well. ETFs, halving, the presidential election, the first, Bitcoin presidential election, obviously the conference in Nashville, I'm forgetting like a million different things that have happened. It's been a whirlwind.
You did. You put on an event in Nashville, the Hot Style Takeover, live show.
Yeah, if you say it fast enough, it sounds like a hostile takeover.
A hostile take. Oh wow,
that was fun. Look, we really try to blend entertainment and education. We try to lean heavier. There are so many great Bitcoin educators. I would, yourself included. And it's a rich ecosystem. We try to lean a little bit more into the entertainment side of things. So we had, bands, mariachi, comedians with Bitcoiners coming up.
Who was the comedian that did that roast?
That was David Lucas.
Yeah, David Lucas. Very, very funny.
Yeah, that was.
I don't think we'll rehash the jokes. You had to be there, but there were some zingers.
Yeah, I was nervous on stage for sure. But he decided to go after Matt Odell and Marty Bent a lot more than he went after me. I think it was part of my placement. I was behind him.
Yeah.
So he was just going straight after.
Marty and Matt were at a desk, so it was like very clear visual targets.
I think that Marty dealt with it a little bit better than Matt. I'm not sure Matt enjoyed it.
Yeah, I think that's right. That was really great. I mean, you also have a partnership with the Human Rights Foundation. I know they put on a lot of events at PubKey.
They were our first sponsor. We host Human Rights Foundation events every month at the pub. Activists from all over the world come in and they talk about how Bitcoin helps facilitate the work that they're doing wherever they're from. It's my favorite series. It's a very special thing because a lot of these stories don't get elevated in mainstream media, right? If it's positive or neutral about Bitcoin, it's price. And then there's the negative stuff that they focus on, such and such company blew up, or somebody's using it for a nefarious purpose. But these stories, the positive attributes of Bitcoin as freedom tech, don't get nearly enough attention. So we're really honored to have that partnership with the Human Rights Foundation.
I mean, you've been involved with HRF a long time. A year I was going to their conference in Oslo, the Freedom Forum.
Yeah, Alex Gladstein, CK, like the whole team, Arsh, I'm leaving many awesome Bitcoiners at HRF, and also non-Bitcoiners at HRF do a fantastic job supporting activists, to fight authoritarianism all over the world.
Yeah, I think Alex was, Phineas might be able to correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think he was maybe our first external guest on the show or second.
Oh, wow.
Like 3 years ago.
He's a good one.
So
he's a good one to get.
We're in a fantasy football league.
Yes.
That Alex, he's finally not, did he make the playoffs? I don't think he did this year.
He didn't make the playoffs. I'm in the semis.
Oh, wow, congrats.
Yeah.
I managed to not be last. It was very close, though.
You got to get out of the gutter.
Very close.
Yeah.
You also have a bunch of interesting institutional sponsors. Disclosure Galaxy was a sponsor through parts of this year.
Yeah, absolutely.
You have people like James Safart, like the Gemini twins, and like you said, ETF issuers.
Yeah.
What's the sort of vibe for institutions interacting with a local neighborhood tavern? And how are you elevating that for them?
We have the benefit of New York City, right, and great partners, right? Galaxy's a fantastic partner of ours. Gemini, ETFs, public Bitcoin mining companies. And, it's New York. It's the capital of finance, private equity, banks, you name it. So it's a good place to do this. If and when we open up in new locations, it's going to focus on that cohort that, is around a new PubKey. So in Texas, it'll be more energy, oil and gas, Bitcoin mining. In D.C., it'll be more policy. In San Francisco, it'll be more tech as we expand. And the hope is to get a PubKey in every city. But that institutional series here in New York is really critical as we see the ETFs, right? The public Bitcoin mining companies, MicroStrategy. We have, I think, effectively, and maybe not completely orange-pilled Wall Street yet, but I mean the penetration over the last 2 years alone is pretty astounding.
I think you're right. This is the center of the universe still. It feels like it to me, at least New York.
Well, look, before these last 2 years, we have Galaxy, Fidelity, we have Van Eck. There was a short list of institutions that were interested in Bitcoin. Maybe 2 years is too short a time frame, but certainly 4 years. If you go back to 2019, these were not the easiest conversations to have with large institutions. Now they have to have them, whether they want to or not.
Yeah, I mean, you got Larry Fink saying it's a hedge against global instability. I mean, actually, I've been blown away by the level at which BlackRock is pushing Bitcoin as a hedging store of value, like a digital gold-like asset.
Yeah.
Rather than just a portfolio diversifier or something like that.
Does that make you nervous? Are we ready for that?
That's a good question. I don't know. Are we? What do you think?
Well, it's happening whether we're ready or not. I think with open source technology, with the protocol itself, you'd always want more time to harden the rules and figure out have we implemented enough scaling? Is privacy where we want it to be? The answer is always no. Like you're never ready for the battle when it arrives, but it's here. And I think liquidity on exchanges are low. Like we're talking about nation states, the SBR here in the U.S. It doesn't matter if we're ready or not. It's happening.
Something's going to happen.
Yeah.
What do you think the role, how broadly in the Bitcoin ecosystem, not just New York, not just as a bar, but as a brand, a gathering point? How has PubKey grown over since you guys launched a few years ago?
Yeah.
What's the sort of place in Bitcoin culture now for PubKey and maybe other third places like that?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, the idea around PubKey was always to be a home for the community, the culture, the plebs, the companies, pretty much the entire space to come and celebrate this thing. It's been wild to see it develop. We have people that schedule extended layovers in New York City just to come and hang out at PubKey for an entire day. That happens on a regular basis. On Twitter, every single day somebody's asking for a PubKey in their city. A lot of them in the U.S., a lot of them international. There's clearly a demand for these types of communities, and there's other instances of third places within Bitcoin. Bitcoin Park in Nashville. It's more of like a campus, co-working atmosphere. The Commons in Austin is part of the Unchained office. These are great places for Bitcoiners to gather and talk about the thing that they really like. What PubKey tried to do is inject a little bit more like entertainment and a more familiar setting, normalizing Bitcoiners for non-Bitcoiners, and I think also vice versa to a certain extent. It's been fun. It's exhausting. I had no background in hospitality whatsoever before this, so the learning curve is steep. But one thing I'll say, the hospitality community is a lot like the Bitcoin community. When you're a part of that, the overwhelming passion, acceptance, sense of community and camaraderie is really, really astounding. So to combine those two things here in New York City has been wild.
And you guys have you do spaces and podcasts. Aubrey Strobel does her podcast there.
Yeah.
So TFTC, Marty Bent has done podcasts there.
Yeah. Peter McCormick.
Right.
I think that we've done some Galaxy Brains as well.
Yeah.
And we host a lot for Reason Magazine. We have the Mars Book Review doing a regular recurring podcast. We rent it out to friends of the pub and to people that are just looking for, a cool setting to record their stuff.
You do comedy shows.
We do comedy shows. We do
pretty
a
good.
little bit of music.
Yeah.
It's a neighborhood tavern that operates as a little bit of a blank canvas, right? This is supposed to be expressive of the local community. And the tie-in for Bitcoin is not forced upon anybody, right? We have our Bitcoin nights, but a lot of the times you'll have folks sitting at the bar that have absolutely no idea what the nerds in the back are talking about.
So what is, by the way, before I ask this, what did you do before? You said you had no background in hospitality. Like, what is your background for the audience?
Yeah, so in the pre-times before Bitcoin, I was a swap and derivative lawyer for Cadwalader and then in-house counsel at BNP Paribas. And then I got into Bitcoin, bounced around the space a little bit. I was at Digital Asset Holdings back when they were a Bitcoin company. They became one of the first blockchain tech companies. Not the best fit for my passions. Then I joined Fidelity in the early days of the incubator, 2015. In 17, left to start a small, Bitcoin fund, which became predominantly focused on mining in the U.S. And we were developing hash rate derivative products out of that entity. COVID hit, and we were looking at the landscape, and PubKey started as a 1 foot in front of the other project, a passion project for the community here in New York that was really decimated by COVID. People left for Nashville, Austin, Miami, and just got out of the city for good reason. But New York has always been home for me and my family. I love dive bars. My favorite dive bar went under, and that's where PubKey presently resides. And we were able to combine all these passions, and it's taken on a life of its own.
So what's next for PubKey?
We are expanding. We're going to be the Winklevoss twins, Cameron and Tyler, stepped in to support in a massive way for us and give us the means to expand operations both physically and also digitally. So you'll see a lot more out of PubKey Productions. You'll see new locations coming soon. They can't happen soon enough, in my opinion. We want to galvanize communities all over the place the same way that I think PubKey has been able to deliver that product here in New York City.
All right. What do you think? I'm excited for that, by the way. That's all. It really has been a great year being in New York. Having a place like PubKey has been it's really game changing, I think, for Bitcoin in New York.
Yeah.
I hope others can get to
I hope
experience
so. Look, that's not for me to say. I can say what I see on a day-to-day basis, but it's always hard to like zoom out when you're there a lot and you're like scheduling these events. You're thinking about the next events and what's next for the company and for the folks that work at the company. But I hope that people feel a sense of pride, being a Bitcoiner, going to PubKey and being able to, share in this experience. A lot like a sports team or like another community. People that are diehard comedy fans, right? Comedy Cellar's a bit of a mecca. Everybody has their sports bar in New York City. If you're a Red Sox fan or a Steelers fan, it doesn't matter. You got a place to go. Being able to deliver that to Bitcoiners has been really special, and I hope that that's resonated with the community.
So Bitcoin culture has evolved many times.
Yes.
Continues to evolve.
Yes.
Even among the so-called maximalists, the sort of the base wing of the Bitcoin-only crowd, there are schisms.
Yes.
How would you describe, like, broadly your view of, like, Bitcoin culture today? Like, what does it mean to be a Bitcoiner? Like, who does that include? Who does it not include?
Yeah.
How you've been in it a long time?
A Bitcoiner, somebody that has Bitcoin,
Yeah,
is interested in Bitcoin. I think it's a really low bar to be a low entry requirement to be a Bitcoiner. If you express interest and you have Bitcoin, you're a Bitcoiner, right? And there are gradations to it. You have the maximalists that, are a little bit more puritanical in how it should be used, how it should be thought about. You have people that are a little bit more experimental with it, with the tech, and they want to like broaden the use cases into layer twos, ordinals, things like that. I think it's a really big tent, and I think that the maximalist, the toxic maxi moniker was a product of the block size war. And a lot of Bitcoiners were not around for the block size war in like 2016, 2017, like that. And even within those toxic maxis, you have, gradations to that. You have the plebs that use it as a simplification for how they should approach the space. You also have the Dragon's Den and those folks that were really like, deeply enmeshed in the tech and the social political breakdowns that were happening around those wars. I think that carried over into the Ethereum boom, the ICO boom in 2017, and was still around during the DeFi boom. So there were schisms within crypto where Bitcoiners wanted to demonstrate that there was a material difference from Bitcoin and the rest of crypto. And I do believe that is a thing. I don't consider myself to be a Bitcoin maximalist. I think I'm a Bitcoin realist. I think that Bitcoin ultimately does just like dominate this internet money realm that we're looking at, that everybody sort of lumps into the same thing. That doesn't mean that I don't think there are interesting projects and experiments happening elsewhere in crypto, but we focus on Bitcoin predominantly. That's our core.
That makes sense. I think, what do you think about the institutionalization of Bitcoin, though? Like, is there a risk? I used to get asked this a lot, leading into and after the ETFs launched. Is there a risk that somehow Fidelity, BlackRock, Invesco, everybody else that's doing it, these big institutions, would somehow impact negatively Bitcoin or Bitcoin governance or take control of Bitcoin?
Yeah, I think that there is a risk of regulatory capture for the on-ramps and off-ramps. I think Bitcoin will continue to operate as intended when you have your Bitcoin, when you run a node, for miners and such and such. Businesses that interact with Bitcoin are subject to, the laws and regulations of whatever country. So regulatory capture for Bitcoin businesses, I think, is a concern. And you could have a world where you have, whitelisted Bitcoin that are in the system, and everything else, if it's self-custody, is going to be blacklisted. Eric Voskuil has done a ton of really great writing on this topic, in particular in his book, Crypto Economics. It's a concern, for sure. I think it's coming. even if it's under the Trump administration or if it was the Harris administration or a future one, I think it's something for all Bitcoiners to be cognizant of, and protecting things like right to mine, right to hold, run your own node, participation in this ecosystem are hills to die on for all Bitcoiners.
Yeah, those are like red lines, right?
For sure.
It's not that you have to self-custody, it's that you must have the right to self-custody.
I think that these rights are entrenched in the Constitution as is, the First Amendment, the Second Amendment, right to privacy. We should be able to rely on this fantastic document that I think we take for granted. That doesn't mean that it doesn't get really complicated now that we have large crypto packs and agendas and all of these things. It'll be a dicey walk over the next couple of years, but it'll be exciting for sure.
You think it's inevitable that's a future fight, basically the partitioning of the network into clean and dirty coins for one reason or another?
Well, we'll see. We had Nick Carter at PubKey talking about Operation Chokepoint 2.0 last week. He has, reason to believe that this investigation into Operation Chokepoint 2.0 may lead to a viable challenge against the Bank Secrecy Act, where the banks and the financial intermediaries were effectively law enforcement. Right? It was shunted off to them, and the rise of AML, KYC, and compliance departments really, were doing something that I don't think was ever really intended for a financial system. If those laws persist, then yes, I think Bitcoin gets sort of shunted into that existing paradigm. Bitcoin has, the potential and the power to, and Bitcoiners, this community has the potential and power to really reshape things, I think, for the better. I think, getting the banks out of this role, getting financial intermediaries out of this role will be a net positive for everybody.
As someone who's been involved in Bitcoin mining for a long time, do you think that this is what's your sort of view on whether it's the institutionalization or the onshoring, or in light of a regulatory regime or support from the new administration? What does the future of Bitcoin mining look like in your mind in the U.S.?
That's a good question. There is a lot of consolidation happening right now. There's a lot of M&A activity. The big miners are getting bigger. Access to capital once you go public really just outstrips anybody that is, has a small operation, self-funded or private. So I think we're going to still see an acceleration of large miners getting larger, particularly in the U.S. It's a global arms race, though, right? So other countries and other companies are not going to just step aside and let large American public miners rule the day here. That wouldn't be good for Bitcoin. It wouldn't be good for the ecosystem if it was just a couple of miners based here in the U.S. And mining pools is an even bigger concern, frankly. So hopefully we see some decentralizing forces come about. I love, these hobbyist projects like BitAxe and other things. That's not going to be a material amount of hash rate from a network perspective. However, I do see a world where we have a lot of other nation states starting to get into the game and compete on that higher level.
I think that makes sense. What about on the intersection with AI or the new demands for high performance compute? Did Bitcoin mine? I've seen, we can't talk about Galaxy, but we've said that we're looking at this. I see reports and headlines all the time about Bitcoin miners getting interested in or doing deals with hyperscalers. Is that, one of the things I always wonder about this, it's we used to talk a lot about, and it's still happening, but Bitcoin being mined behind the meter, right? That electricity producers, energy producers could make use of Bitcoin mining as a sink in a faucet to suck up stranded energy. Do you think there's going to be further overlap if data centers maybe have some extra space and extra megawatts? Maybe non-Bitcoin mining ones, maybe they mine Bitcoin. Is there a way that I feel like there's a future where Bitcoin mining becomes even further actually decentralized out into the data center world?
Yeah.
Have you thought about that?
Yes, absolutely. And we've seen that to a degree. It's different equipment. They operate differently, these data centers, whether they're mining Bitcoin or they have hyperscalers or whatever they're called.
Yeah, the GPUs and whatnot for AI. And,
sure.
Different machines.
And they're sourcing from different companies as well, right? So it's NVIDIA versus TSMC that has a partnership with Bitmain and, MicroBT and Samsung. We'd like to see more options, I think, more like credible options in the ASIC manufacturing space. That would always be a good thing to see. But the economics for a miner or a data center also change, whether they have a contract with, OpenAI or Grok or any of the other power-hungry AI solutions out there. So that could be a flat fee. Whereas, Bitcoin miners, they have that base load variability that they can tap into and tremendously benefit grids like ERCOT and other remote solutions that may not be as suitable or as attractive for hyperscalers and things like that.
Yeah.
So, they're complementary to a certain degree, but I think that we're in the very early stages. I know Crusoe just landed a massive deal to expand into this, and there are many others talking about it, which is really interesting and fantastic to see that progress being made. But I think that we're still trying to figure out what the right fit is going to be for miners and the intersection with energy. And now you have this third cohort, just this deep tech of Google, Microsoft, and the other folks that are now hungrier than ever for power.
It's incredible because there's only one industry that was building massive electrical infrastructure data centers over the last 10 years.
Yeah.
Right. And just what a interesting overlap that happens, especially with all the talk of crypto and AI. If it's combating deep fakes by using timestamping on a secure ledger like Bitcoin, or AI agents launching meme coins and stuff. There's some stuff there, maybe trading based on AI or something.
It's funny how it boils down to the energy.
Yeah.
Right? It's back to basics. You need a lot of energy. And Trump ran on this. Part of his campaign was we need, 10x, 100x the amount of energy that we currently have today. I don't know if he actually said 100x.
I forget what he said, but he did say they were going to drill, baby, drill, and make America the energy powerhouse, and et cetera. It doesn't surprise me.
He told the Bitcoin miners that they'll be begging him to stop with the
Please, sir, no more electricity, sir. That's enough electricity.
That was another banger from the campaign.
I mean, that speech had a lot of very, bullish, but also pretty funny. He's just a funny guy.
He's very
genuinely
funny,
quite funny. I don't know, what gets you excited for the future of Bitcoin?
The community, Bitcoiners, right? I think the meme in 2017 was everybody's getting girlfriends. It feels like everybody's getting, partners and kids now. So it's cool to see, Bitcoiners grow and evolve. A new class come in, the old guard that has stuck around or has been vocal, trying to set the culture and set the mentality for the new generations to come in. I'm obviously excited about Bitcoin communities and the part that PubKey plays in bringing those to new locations. I'm also excited to see, what happens on the nation-state level. There's going to be a really, it's going to be a biblical fight between the individual and the state, and that's what Bitcoin has been central to its entire existence. I'm bullish on the individual. The sovereign individual, but it's never done, right? Decentralization is never a thing that you have; it's always a thing that you work towards. And this centralizing and decentralizing force is, it's never over.
And lastly, Thomas, what in the near term? What's going on at PubKey that people should come down for? If you're in New York, what do you got on the agenda?
We got our Goodbye Gary Gensler Christmas party tonight. On Friday, we have the Danish Christmas lunch by Away Slice, the guy that does beefsteak. Very good friend of mine and extraordinarily talented chef. And honestly, it's been a really busy Q4 for us. Ever since Trump was there, we've always had something going on. Business has been booming. Which we're very grateful for. But historically, January and February are a little bit quiet in hospitality. And I think everybody's looking forward to at least a little bit of a breather so that we can regroup and figure out what the plan of attack is for 2025.
All right, well, come to New York, go to PubKey, make sure the team at PubKey doesn't get that breather. Let's load this place up.
Let's
January,
do it. We can handle
February,
it.
buy 1 million crypto, Bitcoin, smash burgers.
Tip your bartenders.
Thomas, thank you so much for coming back to Galaxy
Thanks
Brains.
for having me. Anytime.
That's it for this week's episode of Galaxy Brains. Thanks to our guest Thomas Pacchia from PubKey and our friend Bimna Dabibi from Galaxy Trading. Everyone have a safe and happy weekend, and we will catch you next week. Thanks for listening to Galaxy Brains, the weekly podcast from Galaxy Research. If you enjoy the show, please like, rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. To follow Galaxy Research, sign up for our weekly newsletter at gdr.email, read our content at galaxy.com/research, and follow us on Twitter at GLXY Research. See you next week.